Now, a decision that at the time when Anthony Albanese had his special mind meld with the Australian people was that Australia has made a decision when it comes to climate change action, despite the fact that every single poll for the past 10 years has said that while Australians know that climate change exists, I'm with them, Australians demand action on climate change, who wouldn't, there's only so much money that they're willing to spend, and for most people it's like $25 a year. But of course, the decision to up the number of renewables in the country to 80% meant that there are literally trillions, T4, trillions of dollars that need to be spent on a completely new electricity system. Not just solar and wind to absorb and to create the energy, new transmission lines to be able to move it around, and then batteries to be able to store it. But of course, the reality of all of this is that it has to be built. And it is literally 22,000 solar panels a day that need to be built. It is thousands of wind farms every year that have to be built, and they all have to go somewhere. But because most of the people who are driving this decision-making process, the ones that sit in the Q&A audience and clap away or technically fill out the form and say, I'm a Liberal voter, when, they haven't for years, or people like Zali Steggall who pretend that they're a disaffected Liberal when, by her own admission, she never voted for Tony Abbott to be our local MP, which means she didn't want Malcolm Turnbull to be our Prime Minister either? Okay. Well, of course, these people could be suggesting that wind farms are needed on things like Sydney's northern beaches, are needed, that perhaps the doggy park at Centennial Park in central Sydney just might have 1 or 2 solar panels on it. Of course not, no. That's for Mudgee. That's for the people in and around Ballarat. But unsurprisingly, the people who grew up or moved to those parts of Australia have no interest in just being, essentially, a giant extension cord for the benefit of people in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane. And people are starting to fight back against the idea of hundreds of thousands of wind farms and solar panels, and all of it is something that they say, look, I get it, we need it, but I don't want it here, because that's the exact same view of all the people in central Melbourne and central Brisbane and central Sydney. And again, an interesting little finding, which you'd have to send out a search party to find in The Guardian today, but thankfully they do eventually, behind 75 closed doors, have the raw data for you. What about this question? Australia needs to ensure that the development of renewables does not come at the expense of local communities. 70% agree. 70% of Australians get it. Because in the same way they wouldn't want their suburb changed, their city changed, why should people in other parts of the country have their area changed? And interestingly, while an organisation still exists in the Farmers Federation, the person who represents the Farmers Federation has changed since they were one of the clapping seals behind the Prime Minister signing this decision to take over regional Australia. And now there's a new Farmers Federation president who has now said, you know what, enough, okay? I get it, I get the balance, but this is too much.
I don't think there's a hotter topic at the moment than what's happening to farmland, especially in the renewable space. Noting that farmers, we're open to the discussion, but when it's being imposed on people, when people are being told that easements are coming through their property without any ability to negotiate or understand what's a good fit to the private land, the farmland, we also want to protect blocks of land that we think are significant, and that's going to be location-based.
So the opposition leader who was right on The Voice, the opposition leader who was right on the Jobs Summit, looks like he's right again when it comes to these renewable projects in regional areas. And it looks like he's right when it comes to nuclear energy. Same poll, same organisation, but try and find the headline. Should Australia embrace nuclear power? 50% of people say yes, including 67% of Liberal and National voters, 43% of Labor voters, 39% of Greens voters and 44% of other party or independent voters. Oh, but the Prime Minister has this special mind meld. Yeah, with the people of Marrickville, the Teal seats and the public service bubble of Canberra.